This happened when I was in the 5th grade of elementary school. At that time, I shared a room with my brother, who was a year older than me. We slept in a bunk bed at night, my brother on the top bunk, while I slept below. One day, probably close to dawn, I found myself in a state where I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or awake, as I experienced sleep paralysis. I was unsure if I was truly awake or still dreaming. I couldn't open my eyelids, and though I tried to move my body, I couldn't tell if my physical form was actually responding. During this state, various images started to appear behind my closed eyelids. At first, they were too blurry to make out, but gradually they became clearer, and I realized they were faces. Several faces were floating near me. They were all faces I recognized. The faces of my father, my brother, my grandfather who was supposed to be dead, and relatives filled my field of vision, floating and slightly swaying. I felt an overwhelming fear and tried to wave them away with my hands in desperation. However, my hands never touched the faces, they only cut through the air. No matter how many times I repeated the action, it was futile. As numerous faces continued to float before me and my hands fruitlessly sliced the air, suddenly a voice came from above. From the upper bunk where my brother was supposed to be sleeping. The voice said, "Ha ha, what are you doing? That's funny, ha ha, doing that is pointless." It was an unfamiliar voice, completely different from my brother's. And just like that, in sheer terror, I half lost consciousness and fell back into sleep. I've mentioned this incident to my brother several times, but he doesn't remember anything and insists he never did such a thing, even as a joke. What on earth was it? To this day, I cannot forget that voice, and it lingers somewhere within me.
What do you think about this story? Waking up in the middle of the night to see a familiar face appearing is a bit too scary, isn't it? But, surprisingly, there might be people around you who have had similar experiences. Shall we try to sleep tonight while paying a little attention to what doesn't appear in our rooms? Or, did my brother's voice tell me something? Hee hee, sorry to those who can't sleep now. Good night.